Welcome to History Date Night, a World War II podcast covering the Second World War in chronological order, from the opening shots to final victory. I'm Justin, and joining me is my wife and co-host, Jenny. Together we explore the people, battles, and turning points that shape the deadliest conflict in human history, one date at a time. On this episode,
the circumstances remain unclear.
They fought with everything they had to the very end.
Dies in exile in a city under blackout.
It is an act of deliberate blindfolding.
Welcome back to History Date Night. I'm Jenny. Last episode we covered September 16th through 19th. The Soviet Union invaded Poland from the east, the French Tsar offensive ended with a shrug, the HMS Courageous was sunk, Lord Haha started his broadcasts, and Hitler stood in Danzig hinting at a secret weapon. Poland was now being squeezed from two directions by the two largest armies in Europe. Warsaw was still holding, barely.
And I'm Justin. This episode covers September 20th through the 23rd. What happens in these 4 days falls into three categories: Poland dying, the world deciding what to do about it, and the machinery of something darker than war quietly starting up. We'll get to all three.
Before we start, pronunciation note. This episode has more difficult names than we're used to, so we are going to do our best and we'll see how it goes.
September 20th. 3 weeks into the invasion, the Army Krakow, the Polish force that had been defending the southern part of the country around Poland's second city, surrenders at the Battle of Tomaszów Lubelski. That's a town about 130 miles southeast of Warsaw, roughly halfway between Warsaw and the Soviet border. 60,000 Polish soldiers go into captivity. The southern front has collapsed.
To give you a sense of the scale, the Battle of the Besieged, the great Polish counteroffensive we covered over the last couple of episodes, officially ends around the same time. German General Blaskowitz notes in his order of the days that his troops have been fighting in what he calls one of the biggest and most destructive battles of all times. 70,000 Polish soldiers go into German captivity. Two massive Polish armies, the force that counterattacked in the west and the force that defended the south, both gone within days of each other.
Meanwhile, German troops in eastern Poland are withdrawing to the demarcation line agreed in the secret protocol of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the line that divides Poland between Germany and the Soviet Union, roughly along the Bug River, which runs north to south through central Poland. The Soviet army moves in behind them, two armies passing each other in opposite directions across the same country they've just divided between them.
And on September 22nd, Lvov, a major city in the far southeast corner of Poland, roughly the size of Milwaukee, a historic city with a largely Polish and Jewish population, surrenders. The Polish commander hands the city over to the Soviets rather than the Germans. The Soviets were seen as the less immediately brutal option. While the SS's behavior in Polish cities so far has made clear what German occupation would mean, though the assumption about the Germans was correct, the assumption about the Soviet occupation would prove tragically wrong. Thousands of Polish soldiers surrendered to the Soviet forces there. The NKVD, the Soviet secret police, immediately begins identifying and separating the Polish officers from the enlisted men. We'll come back to what happens to those officers because it does not end well.
At Brest-Litovsk, the city in eastern Poland, right on the Bug River near the Soviet border, German General Guderian formally hands the city's citadel over to the Soviet Brigadier General formally hands the city's citadel over to the Soviet Brigadier General Grivoshin. In his memoirs, Guderian barely conceals his contempt for the entire arrangement, writing that it seemed unlikely any soldier had been present when the demarcation agreement was drawn up. A formal German-Soviet military parade is held in Brest-Litovsk on September 22nd. Both armies march to the city together. There are photographs and newsreel footage. Germany and the Soviet Union are not allies in name, though. They signed a non-aggression pact, not an alliance. But these images, they do say something else entirely.
And there's a subplot in all of this that reveals the alliance is already under strain. German units chasing fleeing Polish soldiers have been crossing the agreed demarcation line and running into Soviet forces on the other side. In one incident, German soldiers fire on a Soviet Cossack unit, killing 2 men. In one account, the Cossacks retaliate with a saber charge, an actual cavalry charge, and kill 15 Germans before local commanders on both sides can get the situation under control. Two armies that are supposed to be on the same side and share the same purpose are fighting each other over a line in the sand in the chaos of war.
Hitler is also unhappy with the terms of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. He goes back to Stalin and demands the province of Lublin, a large region in eastern central Poland about 100 miles southeast of Warsaw, be added to the German share. Stalin, not wanting a confrontation with Germany at this stage, agrees. This means Warsaw, which had originally been planned as a divided city sitting on the border, will now be entirely in German territory. Poland is being haggled over like a piece of real estate, its cities traded back and forth by telegram between Berlin and Moscow.
And through all of this, Warsaw is still fighting. The city has been under siege and aerial bombardment for weeks. By September 22nd and 23rd, the situation inside the walls is beyond what most of us can picture. The city hall lies in ruins. The sewers have gone destroyed. The pumping station is gone. Warsaw's few remaining functioning wells have long queues of civilians standing in line under shell fire just to get water. The shells are coming in constantly.
The description from a correspondent on September 23rd is one of the most harrowing passages that I've read on the period. At midday, the city is dark with dust and smoke. The dead lie unburied in the streets. Houses topple. The art gallery is on fire. The French embassy is on fire. Still quivering flesh is stripped from a horse's bones as soon as the animal is hit by shell fire. End quote. That's how hungry the people are. They're rushing out under falling shells to butcher animals in the street.
And there's one line from a civilian observer that cuts right through. A woman, watching the destruction, says bitterly, "Perhaps we are going to fight tanks with bows and arrows, like the Abyssinians." She's referencing Italy's invasion of Ethiopia 4 years earlier, when tribesmen with spears faced Mussolini's tanks. She means, we have been abandoned, and we are being asked to hold out with nothing.
But the city is still shooting back. On September 16th, just before our window for this episode, the defenders knocked out 60 German tanks in a single engagement, and forced General Reinhardt to report to his superiors that if ordered to continue the attack, his entire division would cease to exist as a fighting force. Warsaw's commander, Major General Chuma, has been conducting one of the more remarkable urban defenses in modern history, but the math is unsustainable. The garrison commander, General Rommel, not the German Rommel, a Polish one, can see where this ends and begins pushing for surrender talks.
There's also a strange death on September 22nd that says something about the internal politics of Germany's military. Werner von Fritsch, the former commander-in-chief of the entire German army, who was forced out by Hitler in 1938 on fabricated charges of homosexuality, a move designed to remove old guard resistance to Hitler's war plans, is killed by Polish gunfire near Warsaw. The official statement says he was visiting a regiment where he was named an honorary colonel, but there were no reports of fighting in that part of the front that day. Von Fritsch had made no secret of his hatred for the SS and the Nazi leadership. The circumstances remain unclear, and historians still debate whether it was chance or something more deliberate. Whether it was bad luck, battlefield suicide, or something else remains unclear.
September 21st brings two events in rooms far from the front lines that will have consequences stretching years into the future. The first is in Berlin. Reinhard Heydrich, the chief of security police, one of the most dangerous men in the Nazi hierarchy, the architect of the Reich security apparatus, convenes a meeting of police and security officials. What comes out of that meeting is a set of orders that mark a formal escalation in Germany's persecution of Jews and other minorities.
Heydrich orders that Germany's Jews in Roma, also known as gypsies, be transferred to Poland, which Germany now controls a large portion of, using freight cars. He orders the concentration of Jewish populations in large Polish cities that have access to major railroad lines. He authorizes the formation of Jewish councils, called Judenrat, in each city, bodies made up of Jewish community leaders who will be forced to administer German orders within their own communities. And he authorizes the formation of units called Einsatzgruppen, mobile security squads that will follow the army into occupied territory that would soon become central in mass killings.
The Holocaust, as it's taught in history, the systematic, organized extermination of Jewish people across Europe, has its organizational roots in this meeting. The killing is not yet at the scale it will reach. The death camps don't exist yet, but the structure is being sketched out. Concentrate the population, control their information, put their own leaders in charge of administering their captivity, and deploy mobile security units behind the front lines. An early organizational step in what would later become the Holocaust.
On that same day, September 21st, something is also happening in Washington, D.C. President Roosevelt goes before a joint session of Congress and urges them to amend the Neutrality Acts, the laws that prevent the United States from selling arms to countries at war. Roosevelt is careful about how he frames it. He says the current laws actually give passive aid to an aggressor, while denying help to victimized nations. He wants to allow arms sales on a cash-and-carry basis, meaning Britain and France can buy American weapons as long as they pay up front and transport the goods themselves. He's walking a fine line. He wants to help Britain, but he cannot be seen as pulling America toward war.
The Neutrality Acts had been the legal wall keeping American weapons out of Allied hands. Roosevelt is asking Congress to start dismantling that wall brick by brick. The debate will run for weeks, but the direction of travel is clear. America is not neutral in its sympathies. Roosevelt is not neutral, and the machinery is now slowly turning.
While all of this is happening in Poland and Washington, we should check back in on a few other corners of the world, because this is about the entire World War, and it is already a worldwide conflict. September 21st in Romania, Armand Colonescu, the Romanian Prime Minister, is assassinated. Members of a Romanian fascist organization called the Iron Guard block his car with a wooden cart and shoot him and his bodyguards in the street. The assassins then break into a radio station and broadcast a proclamation announcing the execution. They are then captured, tortured for 8 hours, and shot at the scene of the assassination, watched by a crowd. Their bodies are left there for 24 hours as a warning. The Romanian government then hunts down 400 more Iron Guard members and has them shot, their bodies left at crossroads across the country as a counter-warning.
Romania matters for several reasons. It's the country where Poland's government has just gone into internment. It sits between Germany, the Soviet Union, Hungary, and Yugoslavia, with oil fields that every major power covets. The assassination of a pro-Allied prime minister by a pro-Nazi movement, right when Poland's government has just sought refuge there, is a signal of how unstable the entire region is. This won't be the last we hear of the Iron Guard.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the Battle of Changsha is underway in China. Changsha is a major city in Hunan province in central China. Think of it as being roughly in the interior of the country, about the distance from the coast that Chicago is from the Atlantic. It's a city of roughly 1 million people in 1939. The Japanese army has been pushing through China for 2 years at this point, and they're now pressing toward Changsha from multiple directions simultaneously. Infantry crossing rivers to the north, naval forces landing troops to the east.
China matters to this podcast for a reason we said in episode 1. If you lived in China, the war started years before September 1939. Millions of Chinese civilians are already dead. The Japanese occupation of Manchuria, the northeastern part of China, bordering Korea and the Soviet Union, began in 1931. The full scale of invasion of China proper began in 1937. By the time Germany invades Poland, China has been fighting for its survival for 8 years. The Battle of Changsha is one chapter in a war that dwarfs almost anything happening in Europe in terms of sheer scale of suffering. We'll return to China regularly.
There's also a remarkable footnote from September 23rd in the village of Krasnobrud in southeastern Poland, about 150 miles south of Warsaw. A small group of Polish cavalry brigades attacks and surprises the German 8th Infantry Division, which is dug in on a hill. The Germans make a disorderly retreat to a nearby town, hotly pursued by the Poles. The Poles captured the German divisional headquarters. Take General...
We're not sure on this one. General Kokerpach, I think? I don't know.
The Poles captured the German divisional headquarters, take General Kokerbach and around 100 German soldiers prisoner, and free 40 of their own men who'd been in German captivity. And during the battle, a Polish cavalry unit defeats a German recon cavalry unit in direct combat, one of the very last cavalry versus cavalry engagements in military history.
Poland is losing this war. It has been losing it since dawn on September 1st. But on September 23rd, 1939, Polish cavalry is still riding down German recon in the hills of southeastern Poland and winning. That matters. Not strategically, it really doesn't change anything about the outcome, but it is a reminder that the people of Poland did not simply fold. They fought with everything they had to the very end, in whatever form the fighting took.
September 23rd also brings three things that together feel like an epitaph for a certain kind of world. The first, in London, Sigmund Freud dies. He was 83 years old, born in what is now Czechia. He built his life's work in Vienna, fled Austria in 1938 after the Nazi annexation. The Gestapo had arrested his daughter Anna and questioned her for a day. Freud understood many freedoms he enjoyed were now temporary at best. He then spent his last year in London, where he died of cancer. The father of psychoanalysis, who spent his career trying to explain the hidden mechanisms of human behavior, dies in exile in a city under blackout, in a war that seems to confirm his darkest conclusions about what human beings are capable of.
The second, in Germany, the government confiscates radios from all Jewish households. Sounds like a small thing next to everything else happening this week, but it is not. A radio in 1939 is the only way to get real-time information. News, warnings, the shape of the world beyond your own street. Taking the radios means taking away the ability to know what's coming. It is an act of deliberate blindfolding, separating an entire community from information when information, at this point, is most critical to survival.
And the third, Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty, notes in his diary on this week that the past 3 weeks since the war began have been the longest he has ever lived. Churchill is 64 years old. He has lived through the Boer War, the First World War, the Russian Revolution, the rise of fascism. He has been warning about Hitler for a decade, while the political establishment just ignored him. And now he's back in power, running the Royal Navy, watching Poland die, while Britain has done almost nothing to prevent it, knowing what is likely to come next. The longest 3 weeks he has ever lived.
So, where does this leave us? Warsaw is still standing, but barely. It sits besieged, its streets full of unburied dead, its people stripping flesh from horses in the street. Poland's armies in the south and west have been destroyed or captured. Lvov has fallen to the Soviets, taking tens of thousands of Polish soldiers into captivity. Germany and the Soviet Union are dividing Poland by telegram, trading provinces like pieces on a board. Heydrich has sketched the blueprint for something that will become the Holocaust. Roosevelt has asked Congress to start selling weapons to the Allies. Freud is dead. The Jewish radios in Germany are gone. And Winston Churchill has never lived such stressful weeks.
Next episode, Warsaw's final days. The Poles fight in on pockets across the country, even as the capital prepares to surrender. And the world begins settling into what will be called the phony war in the West. A strange, suspended period where the guns go quiet and everybody waits to see what Hitler does next. Thanks for joining us for episode 5 of History Date Night. We'll see you next time.